My name's Amog, and I'm going to be moderating this session. And today we have two very interesting speakers with us. We have Pullanna Vidyapogu from the Council for Social Development in Hyderabad and Indivar Jonnalagadda from Miami University. And they're going to be talking about caste and urban political ecology, enduring structures and elusive dynamics. They're going to be, this is based on some of the work that they're doing, that they've done in Hyderabad, focused around lakes and water bodies there and the social dynamics that kind of take place around those lakes. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Indivar. You can carry over from here.
Thanks, Amog. Am I on mic? Okay, cool. So good evening, everyone. It's such an honor for us to be presenting our work here at IIHS. I'm Indivar, and I'll be co-presenting this work with Pullanna Vidyapogu, who's the first author of this paper. We're going to do a bit of jugalbandi today. I'll introduce the paper and hand it over to him for the first case study, and then I'll do the second case study, and then he'll take us to the finish with the theoretical discussion. But before I get into the presentation, we want to thank IIHS for inviting us, especially Tanvi Bhatikar and Pragna Beleur, who have done so much to bring us here and make this a really comfortable visit, and also everyone else that has made this possible. And we also thank the audience for being here, those in person and online. We hope you find this interesting, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on future directions in which this can go. So we've titled our talk today, Caste and Urban Political Ecology, which is very broad, and in so doing, we've also revealed our deep intellectual depths. Particularly, we are indebted to anti-caste theory and literature, which has given us both the project of urban spaces as spaces of emancipation, and has also shown us, on the other hand, the many persisting dangers of caste in urban spaces. We're also indebted to a rich scholarship on political ecology in India, which has grappled with the dynamics of caste, class, and other socioeconomic structures as they mediate human-environment relations. And finally, the paper we are sharing today joins a larger stream of work, bringing a critical caste lens to political ecology. We were lucky to be a part of a conversation on anti-caste political ecologies in March 2023, where we presented alongside many other early career scholars and got discussant comments from Malini Ranganathan, and we thank them also for their feedback on this. So with these intellectual debts acknowledged, let me begin. What is the role of caste in urban political ecology? At a macro scale, there is a naturalization and essentialization of ecological hierarchy through the idiom of caste. So caste persists as a system of domination which shapes urban environments. In this talk, through our examples from Sheikhpet in Hyderabad, we draw attention to a different scale, to the micro and meso scale, where the caste dynamics are a bit murkier, where different groups, even different marginalized groups, use caste-based institutions and idioms to make competing assertions over urban environments. We use a state festival of Batkama as our methodological entry point into the workings of caste and political ecology at these lower scales. And by scaling down from this macro level casteist environmental unfreedom, we argue that closer attention to the fluidity of caste relations in everyday ecology holds important insights for understanding the elusive urban dynamics of caste, and also poses challenges for building a politics to contest the enduring hierarchies in urban political ecology. And let me get into the empirics. Our empirical story begins in Hyderabad. On 16th July 2014, the government of Telangana announced that Batkama would hereby be a state festival as it signifies the unique culture of Telangana. The government of Telangana, led by the then Telangana Rashtriya Samiti, now Bharat Rashtra Samiti, BRS, appealed to all citizens of Telangana to celebrate these new festivals. The government's call was taken up fervently in the various neighborhoods of Hyderabad. Batkama in particular emerged as a platform for articulating belonging in the new state of Telangana. And so local caste associations and resident welfare associations lobbied to become organizers of the festivals, hence making caste-based institutions into conduits for resources from the state and political parties to specific communities. So this democratization of the Batkama festival had many subtle and significant effects on the everyday social relations in Hyderabad's urban localities, even beyond the project of state making. Batkama afforded itself to us as an unexpected methodological site for us to examine intersecting cultural, political, and ecological dimensions of urban water bodies. So based on observations collected over time in both our fieldworks, we show that caste-based identities have been specifically mobilized by communities in making claims over local resources and in lobbying for access to state resources and recognition. So a little more introduction to Batkama. Batkama is celebrated in September or October during the auspicious 9 days leading up to Dasera. The rituals involve firstly creation of an elaborate bonum or a bouquet as symbols of Batkama. This bonum is the center of a folk dance performed by women. And finally, this bonum is immersed in the nearest tank or lake. So prior to becoming a state festival, Batkama had a particular caste dynamic as reported by fieldwork respondents. For example, Lakshmamma, resident of one of the slum settlements in our field site, said that ritual precedence was given to specific caste communities. These groups are today classified by the Indian government as OBC, but they are higher in status than Dalit communities who traditionally have a lowered ritual priority and status. Not only was there precedence in terms of order of celebrating, there were also separate access points to the water body. So there was a clear social and spatial hierarchy of organization between caste groups who are all relatively marginalized as compared to upper caste groups. So in the wake of Batkama being made the state festival and being introduced into the urban spaces of Hyderabad, this caste dynamic has been transformed by collapsing the orders of precedence, by democratizing access points, and as a result of the government inviting all castes, including Dalits and upper castes alike, into the fold of Batkama. In remarking about Batkama since 2014, Pandu, a resident of Vattinagulapalli village in Hyderabad, said, "Now there are new communities which have become involved in the festival, such as political party groups and upper castes. Of course, they are the ones now leading the festival, especially due to their connection to the local political class." The transformation of festivities occurred spectacularly in 2014 when Batkama was kicked off in the heart of Hyderabad by K. Kavita, an upper caste woman who was then a member of parliament and is the daughter of Chief Minister K. Chandrasekhar Rao. Kavita, by example, invited women of all castes to participate and celebrate the state festival. In urban areas, this blurring of caste-based ordering resulted in a competition for precedence and special access. The result was that new caste divisions and exclusions emerged in different localities, as various local associations vied to concentrate the symbolic capital, and hence the resources being made available. In this talk, we engage with this complex associational life that's animated by Batkama and the dynamics of how this cultural practice reworked the matrix of relations between various caste groups and their cultural ecological claims and roles. Now, in all the social flux engendered by the advent of Batkama as a state festival, the lakes in the region are of crucial significance. Batkama as a ritual has everything to do with water bodies. It's a ritual undertaken to celebrate the life-giving and livelihood-giving properties of water. We attend to the constitutive role of caste relations as determinants of not just spatial but also environmental differentiation in the city. And secondly, we examine what Amita Baviskar and David Moss call the cultural politics or the cultural ecologies of water, where identities, interests, and resources are emergent products of cultural production rather than pre-given structures. In our field sites, the cultural politics of Batkama surfaced as competition between caste associations. On caste associations, we follow Suryakant Vagmore's work. In his work on upper caste associations in Mumbai, he's compellingly shown that the particularistic and communitarian agendas of caste associations influence modern urbanism in India's cities. Combining an attention to caste associations as a political form and cultural practices of Batkama and political ecology, we show how caste geographies shape urban environments. So the research sites in this paper are two distinct geographies, which we'll call Site A and Site B for convenience. Site A is the long enduring Sheikhpet village straddling the tank called Yerrakunta that has existed. This village has existed for a long time and has gradually been assimilated into the city, though residents still call it their village. Site B is a cluster of bastis or slum settlements alongside another tank called the Sheikhpet Kotta Cheruvu. These bastis are newer and have emerged only over the last 30 years. Today, neither of these lakes are anchors of livelihood for people living around them. But nonetheless, Sheikhpet village, which is populated by various caste groups organized into caste associations, who claim specific relationships to the lake, the fauna it supports, and its surrounding resources like soil and vegetation, despite the lake no longer being tied to livelihood. And in bastis, the groups that are living there do not have historical links to the lake, but nonetheless, they use their organization as slum welfare associations to strategically engage in practices that link them to the lake and to the environment they live in. And we show that caste relations influence these welfare associations as well. So with that, I'll hand it over to Pullanna for the first case study.
Thank you, Indivar, and thanks for all coming here to hear our story. To start with Site A, so in late September 2015, Sheikhpet village was gearing up for a celebration of Batkama at Errakunta. So Errakunta, that the one you saw in the last slide, so that is just adjacent to the village. So by most criteria, Errakunta was no longer a lake. Not only did it lack of water, but it was highly contaminated as a result of the sewage and garbage disposal by around the population. People therefore saw it as a practically and morally unfit for immersing a goddess called Batkam. Thus, temporary ponds were constructed with concrete within the lakes to run up the festival. Nonetheless, on the eve of Batkama celebrations, there was no water in the temporary pond and was had to be brought from the other locations to immerse Batkama in the lake. During the festivities that evening, although the state had called on all the communities to celebrate, since it became as a state festival, it was only one caste group, that is Gangaputras. Gangaputras means fishermen, who dominated the proceedings in the village. Not because of traditional claims, but rather upon emerging as a political dominant group. So let us unpack how that dominance was achieved in the village. Sheikhpet village, situated on the shore of Errakunta, as I mentioned, has a series of symbolic roles reported by residents of different castes. These roles imply specific relations to the water body and its ecosystem. Gangaputra, who are fishermen, claim and exercise rights over fish and water. The Munurkapu, who are the farmers, make claims on the arable land. Then Mudirajus, who are traditionally as hunters and gatherers. So then Rajakas, who are washermen, claims on the over land, and alongside the lake, alongside they have the right. I mean, anywhere they can just get in the lake and wash their clothes, right? So then we have Dalits also, who traditionally worked as agricultural labor and have customary claims over a limited range of social obligations. So apart from these, we have also other social caste communities, are pot makers, blacksmiths, and carpenters, who also make claims on soil, water, wood, and land in the lake ecology. The above roles attributed to caste communities have resulted in a long enduring customary practices related to the lake and its water. So they endure even though many of these occupations are no longer practiced. The fish in the lake has been wiped out due to pollution from industrial and commercial establishments from the upper stream of the lake. Dalit communities lost their agricultural land since the land has transformed from agriculture to residential to the commercial purposes. So other service communities have also shifted to their livelihood options, like petty businesses, government jobs, going to software training, and so on. So changes in the land use pattern due to the conquest of urban real estate development as the hegemonic land use in the city. The entire political ecology and older cultural geography has not been erased, despite all the transformations, and even despite a lake that many might pronounce dead. A lively network of socio-cultural relations and customary claims animate the ecology of the lake. Although in a submerged register, These claims are sustained through careful organizations of caste associations, which receive significant community investment. For example, here are a few images of caste bhavans of the environments around the Sheikhpet village. So this is the Rajaka Sangam Bhavan, which is located in the inside the lake boundary. This is a Mudiraju Sangam Bhavan. Next is this is Bijar Community Hall, also called Harijan Community. Harijan Sangam Bhavan. Sorry. This is Gangaputra Sangam Bhavan. Please make note of these. Bhavans are not built as like a bhavans. So these are all residences earlier. So they converted into as bhavans. So the shift has happened in a particular time period. So I'll come to that one if you can ask me questions regarding that. So to return to Batkama, state support for celebrations meant that money was channeled to local associations to organize decoration and other infrastructure for the festivities. In Site A, it was the existing caste associations that emerged as the local nodes for this resource transfer from the state. Each of these caste groups mentioned above has a presence in the urban village, and they also have caste associations. But not all associations are equally influential. This brings us back to the aforementioned dominance of Gangaputras. So the reason for the dominance of Gangaputras as an OPC caste group themselves is not a simple matter of hierarchical precedence or special allegiance with the ruling party. Rather, it is historical and politically contingent. Firstly, Gangaputra caste associations have emerged in translocal organizing across the state over the past few decades to ensure that they continue to establish their formal rights over fish in the lake. They do so by carefully organizing to monopolize the fishing rights auctioned by the state. They also pressure the state to auction fish rights in all the lakes irrespective of their current ecological health. Thus, even though the lake does not actually yield fish, they make formal claims to fish in order to lay claims on the lakes as a resource, thus giving them a state-recognized role as environmental custodians. Secondly, the Gangaputras are traditionally custodians of the goddess called Kattamaisamma, whose temples can be found alongside all the lakes and reservoirs in the region. Kattamaisamma has over time also become important in the cultural lives of other communities as well. The Gangaputras were therefore well organized to lobby for resources and to culturally appropriate Batkama as part of their cultural and political identity making in the city. So a process which might keep at bay what the president of Gangaputra Association said, that the threat of disappearing from the cultural landscape of the city. So these political tactics of Gangaputras in celebrating Batkama were critiqued by others in Sheikhpet village in telling ways. Many noted that this group had never worshipped Batkama prior to 2014, but they mobilized to capture available resources when the new state of Telangana emerged. K. Raju, vice president of Rajaka Sangam, said that Gangaputra community is able to organize Batkama festival at Errakunta because of the money provided by the local ruling party leaders, and the other communities have been relatively marginalized. Raju added that the leaders of Gangaputras are using it as a political party activity rather a cultural activity. This is not because of a special relation between the caste group and the political party, but due to the emerging on top in a political competition that all the communities were involved in. The emergent power of Gangaputras in this case demonstrates how caste associations are crucial intermediaries between the state and communities. Further, it shows that caste identity is not a textual or traditional given, but rather it is a dynamic and ongoing social stratification. It has real impacts on the present life of the city. So the work of caste associations cannot be limited to infra-related welfare, but rather must be understood in terms of its impacts on inter-caste relations and its influence on the political processes at both local and translocal scales. Caste groups such as Gangaputras organizing as associations are strategically oriented towards the state in a bid for recognition as custodians of environmental resources, thus raising questions about the role that caste plays in everyday environmental governance. So by focusing on caste associations, we observe two tendencies in caste in urban spaces. On the one hand, caste associations are the institutional platforms for preserving caste identity. On the other hand, for marginalized caste groups, they are also institutional pathways to politically contest the existing socio-economic structure and to remake cultural practices and relations. Thus, there is a dialectic whereas caste-based institutions become crucial to the politics of marginalized caste groups. Thus, our cases of compel a consideration of urban ecologies where the relations between cultural practices and environments are always in flux. In our field side, focusing on associational life reveals on an ongoing reworking of relations between caste communities in Sheikhpet. And caste associations allow Sheikhpet communities to make claims on larger political formations like political parties, the city, and the state government. Now, Indivar will present the case study of B.
So in September, is my mic on? Okay. Is that on? Okay. Where was I? Right. So also the larger Kotta Chervu had enough water that it didn't require the construction of a special pond. So it was the Slum Resident Welfare Association of a specific basti called Babu Jagjeevan Ramnagar who organized the celebrations we witnessed. Most of the association members belonged to OBC communities, including Rajakas, Gangaputras and others, who were migrants to Hyderabad and had memories of celebrating Batkamma in their rural homes. Flyers were distributed with invitations for all to come join the celebration, and an invitation was extended to the MLA of the area as well, who belonged to an opposition party. On the evening of the celebrations, the festivities spilled out of the bastis and into the road on the lake embankment. The access point to the lake was occupied by two men who were helping the women to immerse the bonums in the water. So although the Sheikhpet bastis are demographically mixed, it was mostly OBC women who came forward to celebrate. Many of them were kin of the Slum Welfare Association members who were putting on this political spectacle. While the male association members got access to material resources and political networks as a result of organizing the festival, the women also gained cultural capital from bearing this burden of tradition, some of them creating political networks of their own. Ultimately, that evening the MLA did not show up, but local leaders made speeches about how Batkamma should be celebrated by all, a plea that was applauded by an ironically homogeneous crowd of OBC groups. In Sheikhpet bastis, it's not just one community, one OBC community that dominates the proceedings. Instead, it's a range of similar OBC groups participating in the festival and invoking their traditional performance of the festival coming from their rural homelands. Dalit residents were marginalized in the process. Slum welfare associations in Sheikhpet bastis have various functions. Primarily, they pursue welfare for diverse neighborhood communities. They make claims on the development apparatuses of the state, and sometimes they're organized to consolidate caste alliances. With these practices, welfare associations become power brokers for and within communities, and they've become stringent pressure groups to make demands from the government. Over time, they've developed intimate links with local political party leaders and cadres, and with government officials. Thus, when funds and resources became available for celebrating Batkamma, the Slum Welfare Association became key nodes for distribution of these resources. But a less analyzed aspect of these associations is the importance of caste calculations and how they operate. Most slum welfare associations in the Bastis are entangled with caste associations, either by sharing members or by mimicking the caste association form as an effective strategy for local organizing. And all these organizations are registered with the state, including all the caste associations. Members of associations sometimes belong to the same caste, or in many cases, all the higher positions are occupied by men of only one caste group. For example, in one of the bastis called Vivekananda Colony, the welfare association was created by one man who made himself president and populated it with others from his caste. Overall, people in the bastis, or Site B, also started using caste identity to assemble a similar kind of power to what we've shown in the case of Sheikhpet village. Since the legitimacy and efficacy of a slum welfare association is itself tenuous, caste solidarity is a powerful resource to shore up influence and power. And in some cases, caste solidarity entails marginalization of some other caste group. For example, the marginalization of Dalits in the Batkama celebrations of Babu Jagjeevan Ram Nagar, in favor of consolidating OBC groups' access to the state. So in vying for these positions of political influence, a whole range of new people around the lakes have started claiming the festival as their own, irrespective of their prior association with the lake and festival, and as a result also making claims on the lake. It's in the language of caste and through the medium of these associations that these claims are articulated. So the politically mediated associational life in Sheikhpet has transformed the festival process and at the same time reworked relations among the lower strata of the localities. Celebrating the festival together has allowed Basti residents to assert their cultural identity in the city in a certain way, and that's why they're interested in it. It facilitates their claims to the lake, even though their rights to the lake are not customary or hereditary. These ritual performances for them are part of a wider process of political claim making in the city. And it's necessitated by their generally marginal social and geographical location. So Batkama is yet another site to perform belonging, to claim links with environmental resources, and to gain recognition and support from the state. Observing a cultural practice like Batkama and Sheikhpet reveals that populations both old and new leverage caste relations and caste claims to the lakes. Through repeated activities, through patronage, through construction, through regular ritual practices at shrines, through everyday practices related to livelihood, and also through a host of state-mediated processes such as auctions, like fishing auctions for the Gangaputras, and other goddesses and festivals. Further, foregrounding the work of these caste associations and welfare associations reveals a sort of caste-informed politics that facilitates these many practices. So, what do we make of this case? Nikhil Anand has argued that the historic, political, and material relations that urban communities make with water infrastructures are constitutive of a hydraulic citizenship that contrasts with ideologies of liberal urban citizenship. A crucial aspect of hydraulic citizenship for marginal urban populations from our cases is the mobilization of specific caste identities and histories to enhance the benefits they gain from the materiality of the lake, a practice necessitated by the exclusion from abstract civic rights and clear private property. In our field sites, there's a strong moral and customary idiom of claiming resources such as lake, water, fauna, soil, and vegetation. Although the idiom of property is dominant and hegemonic in the city and claims to land are tenuous in these spaces, this language of customary claims through caste to co-occurring resources, not directly land, is a living idiom for claiming rights to the city and rights to have rights to resources in the city. And these idioms might be submerged under the hegemonic language of property, but they nonetheless offer limited space to negotiate the terms of hydraulic citizenship. Although this comes at the cost of creating new divisions and competing dispossessions, in Gayatri Nayar's terms, among those who are already marginalized. So with that, I'll hand it back to Pullanna for the closing section.
So I'll present one concluding empirical observation before going to discussion. So Batkama did not emerge as a state festival, an already formed mission of revitalization of the lakes in the region. But by the nature of the festival, the way lakes were always implicitly valorized. Further, as celebrations were carried out in places like Sheikhpet village, where dead lakes and lack of water marred the proceedings. Batkamma materially, politically, and effectively influenced the emergence of an ecological project for lake restoration and beautification known as a Mission Kakatiya. The mission aimed to revitalize lakes and revive the prosperity of the pre-modern Kakatiyas, bringing ever greater resource and opportunities for political influence through relations with lakes. In Sheikhpet village, the Gangaputra Association is utterly confident that they can negotiate with the state. The president said unflinchingly to me that we will safeguard our interests. We know how to get our share. This clearly shows that the political will of Gangaputras to continue extending their local and translocal organization. In order to get recognized by the state as custodians of lakes, in contrast, Rajakas have a weaker organization and they vary the mission as a threat for their livelihood. So given the political outcomes of Batkamma, they are not sure that they have the strength to show their number to negotiate with the state for compensation to the livelihood losses they might face. So they are recruiting migrant Rajakas in the bastis around the lake in the Site B to strengthen their influence in the village area, thus providing a new and emerging political and ecological connection between the two sides in our story of Sheikhpet. More recently, Sheikhpet Kottacheru at Site B Lake has actually been selected for beautification under the state level Mission Kakatiya program. Thus, for new populations such as those in the bastis, the Mission Kakatiya scheme has a new opportunity. Firstly, to stake claims on natural resources, and secondly, to strengthen their belonging in the city through environmental custodianship and through state patronage. So the lakes are no longer a productive common full resource supporting lives and livelihoods. Nonetheless, they are part of the political ecology of the region and has a symbolic connection to the heritage of Telangana, which present opportunities to forge relations to the city and state. Caste associations or residence associations strategically position groups to become involved in these negotiations with the political parties. Thus, migrant Rajakas in Site B are also interested in forging solidarities with long-time resident Rajakas in Site A. By concentrating opportunities for cultural and political identity making, caste and welfare associations make communities strategically nimble in relation to the state. But they also keep alive the idioms of caste hierarchy. So these ongoing dynamics entail new configurations for intercaste relations, for cultural ecologies, and finally, for how government manage their relations. So here, what does all this entails for caste and urban political ecology, right? So our case studies of Sheikhpet, Kottacheru, and Errakunta show that the continuous struggle and competition among marginalized caste groups to access resources, in the absence of a caste-less liberal or progressive framework for claim making in the city, communities in Hyderabad rely on claims made on the basis of caste identity to form local solidarities, to lobby with political parties, and to negotiate with the bureaucracy as well. So this reliance on caste identity as a platform for getting political recognition has a twofold effect. Firstly, the local level, the power geometry between caste groups continue to take the form of hierarchical stratification in the absence of traditional upper caste elites. OBC groups gain dominance by reproducing upper caste strategies for concentrating capital by subordinating and excluding the other caste communities in the village. Secondly, at the state level, spaces like Sheikhpet village and the slum areas get re-inscribed as subaltern spaces where caste associations trump other liberal and civic modes of organization. In contrast to the civic organizations of elites, where caste power geometries are subtle and obscure. So the resident welfare associations of the villagers and slum dwellers are overtly determined by caste. Thus, even as local power geometries reproduce structural forms of caste dominance, the spaces as a whole are in turn dominated by the upper caste elites in the city. So this scenario raises challenges for an anti-caste political ecology to contend with. One is the different caste groups, both OBC and Dalits, are making claims from subordinated social locations. So in the absence of caste-less civic institutions, they invest heavily in valorizing their caste identities, their religious practices and symbols, and mostly for OBCs, also their traditional occupations. So they sometimes articulate this valorization as a resistance to erase their cultural identity. In our field sites, we see that these dynamics play not only in regards to Batukamma and the other state festivals like Bonalu, but with regards to the many goddesses festivals that worshipped traditionally by OBC and Dalit caste communities. Most recently, this dynamic has also extended to competition between caste groups to patronize and construct new temples to maintain Hindu deities like Hanuman and Shiva. The second thing is the caste associations are crucial intermediaries in the everyday workings of political parties and by extension in the everyday workings of governance itself. So in our sites, we find people's collective demands often adopt the idiom of caste. With growing recognition about the segregation of space in Indian cities, in ways that replicate caste segregated village spaces, these caste associations offer an important lens to understand the processes by which caste geographies are produced. Thirdly, the cultural ecological competitions we describe occur whenever there is a chance in relation to resources like lake, water and land. The local shifts in relations must also be placed in relation to the wider political ecology of the city, where lakes and socialized land relations are at various stages of disappearing or erasure. In this light, the continuous struggle of all the social caste communities in the village and around centers and around their life and citizenship, but does not always substantively extend it to centers around their life and citizenship. It does not always substantively extend, supporting the life of the lake or a resource. Thus, enduring customary claims do not necessarily correspond to enduring practices of custodianship. So, amidst all this dynamics, some anti-caste strains exist, particularly among Dalit groups, but they are stifled by the normative structures that reproduce caste hierarchies and stratification. The normatively dense geographies of Indian cities, where even nominally liberal or radical institutions are entrenched in caste, necessitate a strategic essentialism around caste even for dominated groups. So the challenge then is to imagine pathways for urban governance and environmental resource governance that will protect the environmental interests of dominated caste groups while promoting new casteless idioms and institutions. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you. So we'll now open the session up for questions. So we'll do this in the following way. First, we'll take questions from the audience over here, and that'll give time for the people online to type in their questions as well. So folks online, if you want to type in your questions, please use the Q&A section, and you can enter your questions in there. We'll take questions from the audience here first, and then I can read out the questions from which have come in online. Yeah. Any questions from the audience here?
Thank you for your presentation. It was really interesting, and the way you wrote about it is simple, but it's still understandable, and that's what I think we have the problem with understanding, a lot of academic literature. So I think thank you for that. And there were a lot of things that came up. I think the one thing was how the site that you selected itself is part of a larger urban political ecology of the city itself. So probably, if we could locate, I mean, obviously you might have done it, but locating the place itself within the larger urban political ecology of the city would be an interesting aspect to look at. Why do only the OBCs and the Dalits have to occupy the space, and further they are marginalized within these spaces. And other aspect, I think, which is similar to Bangalore is also about commons, how commons such as lakes. We have this image of everything becoming commons, but with, the customary aspects as well as the state interventions in terms of building, beautification, the commons then get converted into contested commons. So what are your thoughts on that? And lastly, about association to customary events, customary actions. For example, if you are a fisher, you are by virtue of your occupation attached to the lake, and that's how you build your identity, right? So here, how has your comments on the shifting identities, because you had the Dalits who were celebrating the festival, but then now the OBCs have come over and taken over in sort of way. So how does that association also change with the changes in the larger political landscape? Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to start? Sure.
Does anybody else have any questions? So we can take a couple more and then address them all together.
Thank you for your presentation. So my question was, did you find out any influence on areas you took? I mean, like what happens in one area, did it influence on what is going to happen or what was happening in other area? Because what we saw is in that Sekpet village, that associations were made based on caste, and in that slum area it was based on welfare, right? Like mixes of different. And I could see that Gangaputra, whatever caste, they had more influence in that one area, site A. So did that affect in site B? Is there any connection? And if not, why it is so? Because I also saw that in one area, it was like the people who were there from the beginning, but in slum, I think mostly they were migrants. So is there any connection between that?
Sure. You want to start, Pullanna?
Yeah, I'll start. Thanks for your questions. Those are really intriguing and also compelling me to further understand. But with the limited understanding of my study, the spatial location itself is something that as urban, we never think that there is a rural always, right? So this has occurred once I entered into the village where I saw a Bijar community hall called Harijan Sangam Bhavan. So that itself, I shook by looking at that, because I come from rural area and I never saw that those association names in the name of caste. So this is the first impression that I got. And all the spaces in the city are not the same. Not every area is not having these signboards of caste associations. So you have residential welfare associations of these names of associations, but
yeah, we can.
Sorry. So, but not. Yeah, but not other locations. So, I felt that this place is empowered enough politically. The way they realized things that have happened to their customary rights. So these associations have emerged when they saw that their resources have been shrunk and disappearing. So that they have started this initiating as a group. So coming together is giving more voice to the group, right? So that's how the formation has started. But the process itself is informally bringing caste, since their since they belong to the particular professions, but those particular professions have a caste name. So each profession lead by caste, right? So we identify that each profession has a caste. So that's why those caste calculations have also brought into the processes and started bringing about those rural experiences of earlier time into the modern urban life. So I think that is for your first question. I think I might have answered that. And the second thing is contested contested commons, right? So when I started looking at applying urban commons, so I felt that starting looking at as a common property resources. So caste associates a particular association with the common property, and over a period of time, when it came to the urbanization process, the land use pattern has changed entirely, the way it has to be used. So that itself changed their association with the lake. So the common becoming as a private entity. At this time, you have a new migrant population that also started claiming the resources as their own. So this has been done not by, with the deliberate action, but it is like the repeated deliberative actions of the migrants in the place. So this has gone in intensively when they started looking at this resource we can claim. So that repeated access to the lake place has made them at loss that to owning that particular land they can repeatedly visiting. So this is morally correct from their, morally they claim initially, and now physically also they are doing that, politically also contesting, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's fine. I just wanted to add to this also that, one of the things that we're drawing out of these case studies is that even though there's all of this dynamism around commons and around customary claims to the commons, the interest of the commons itself is not what is being pushed forward. So people are engaging in this as a political mobilization to gain recognition from the state. So that's one of the tensions also, that yes, you have this contested commons, but it's only in terms of claims, not actually in terms of custodianship. And that happens even in terms of new associations to these traditional occupations. Symbols are revived, but not really practices of custodianship.
Yeah. So again, the arguments of Eleanor Ashram and Harini Nagendra's work also, falls into that. But again, like my study is bringing up that the political lens of looking at these is a miss. So that's where I find it like, these all nuances is, sort of adding up to what is really happening to the very contestation of the space with the identity of as a caste, jati, and also as a modern citizen. So various identities contesting differently, and also getting what they wanted based on, they see the time of claim, time to claim and contest. So that's how they do. So the third thing is, coming to the influence, right? Influence to the initially the lake and surrounding area is owned by the caste communities of Sheikhpet village. So new migrants to the Sheikhpet village is like a subordinated communities, though There are upper caste people, some slums, and OBCs and Dalits also there. So you have diverse population. But Sheikhpet is having a big say on whatever they have to do in the lake area. So that's how it started. Politically also, the Sheikhpet villagers have a direct links with the local political parties and leaders. So the migrant workers does not have a negotiating power with the local political parties. So they first what they have done is that to stay there, to stay around the Sheikhpet lake, they have to appease the Sheikhpet village people first. So with the people's kindness, they started that this is a place that we can stay. So the other thing that they have done is that whatever the political interests of Sheikhpet villagers, these are the people always present. For any procession, festival processions, or showing up the number in front of the political leaders and parties. So these are like working as like a background, secondary citizens. So this is how they started. Over a period of time, they also started connecting with local political leaders through the second cadre level of Sheikhpet village leaders. So this is how they started. Now with the repeated actions and the kinds of dominance that they got on the lake place, they are now directly accessing local political party leaders like MLA, corporators, in the name of, again, association, Slum Welfare Association. So that's how they empowered by looking at the caste associations, what Sheikhpet village caste associations have been done. So they started mimicking them and sort of empowered, and they have been doing on their own now. So again, it's like initially, they does not have showing any impact on them itself on the lake area. Now it is like not only on the lake area, but also Sheikhpet village. So this is a sea change that has happened in the lake. Thank you.
So let's take a round of online questions. So I'll read out the first three that have come up over here. Jagdish asks, I can see a parallel between the political ecology and social dynamics that you have shown in the city to the transformation of the Medaram Jatara in the forests of Etur Nagaram in Telangana. I hope I pronounced that right. From an Adivasi tribal ST-dominated festival in earlier decades to a massive festival catering to a different social composition with implications of identity and belonging of the original communities as well as the disturbed local ecology. I think that's a comment more than a question. But I don't know if there is anything that you want to respond to over here. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the commonalities between this Medaram Jatara and Batukamma is these are local deities. These local deities are very much part of everyone's life in the region. So the Batukamma is connected through the water. The Medaram Jatara, Samakka and Saraka, is connected through the forest and resources. So these are the common things. And again, like the kinds of transformations and changes that have been happening to the festivities of Batukamma and Medaram Jatara is like, one see that it is like a normal processes of changes, but there are very intensive steps that one does to the festivals also you can see. For instance, Batukamma, before making it as a state festival, it is a rural festival. It is not urban festival. It is largely celebrated in rural areas. That too, only one particular caste group, OBCs largely, followed by Dalits. It has never been like everyone's festival. So now, when Telangana emerged, the state become itself recognized that Batukamma can be a cultural identity of Telangana. So that's where it becomes everyone's. So does it really everyone's culture is a bigger question? Again, this one to ask. So in a way, in Medaram also, those kinds of changes. Like the particular events of events to the festivals, either it is like organizing or in a way to in a way to support the festival also. So these are all like making our festivals more, in a way more celebrate more in extravaganza sort of thing, because spectacle. Yeah. So it's like we have achieved a state, and it is our cultural identity. So this is how it is. It should be become. But if you see, it is. If you see, these festivals are like the fundamentals or principles of these festivals. If you see that there are many drastic changes that has been happening. But if you merely confine it to as it is just as a social construct, then we have bound to think about how these changes can be seen and which lens this can be justify in a way to put it in a way that this is not good way to celebrate, this is not bad way to celebrate, it doesn't represent everyone. All these kinds of questions can be answered if you make it that as like if it is not a social construct.
So I think you've answered the second question as well, which basically asked why was Batkamba chosen as a state-level festival. So I'll read out for the third question. Wanted to ask you to say a little bit more about your argument from site A that claims through caste also occur due to the absence of civic modes of making claims. Do you think then that a more assertive civic or public state would change caste claims in the urban, either as a replacement or as an addition?
Thank you so much for the question. So I think that is something that we've been coming around to thinking of, because in both of our fieldwork, we keep finding these caste associations emerging to make certain collective claims in the absence of other kinds of platforms for collective claim making, right? Or, of course, there can be more, there can be strident forms of collective claim making where people organize to pressure the state, maybe through actions or collective actions. But this, people have realized, is a more, is a sort of a way to approach the state which will get less resistance. And in the Bastis, I often found that caste associations emerge even before welfare associations, or in some of the cases where I've done my field work. So it does raise the question about, would a more robust framework of inclusive citizenship for residents of Bastis redirect some of this political energy into more civic modes of organizing. And what we're kind of arguing here, maybe it's that's kind of our pitch here, that if we think of these caste claims as indirect claims to citizenship, then maybe one of the things to be addressed here is providing better channels for direct claims to citizenship. So yeah, that's what I'll say.
Thanks for that. Let's go back to the audience here for a bit. Any questions from the audience at this point? Yeah?
Sorry. Hi, thanks for this wonderful talk and uncovering this dynamics in this place in Hyderabad. My question was on understanding the composition of the OBC groups and the Dalit groups that you mentioned, and what is how does the population work for these two groups? This is the first question, and whether there are other OBC groups who feel marginalized in the entire space, and yeah, that's pretty much. Thank you.
So the village is basically comprised with OBC caste communities. You have Dalits, then you have, there is no Muslim population, not even one house. So here is absence of upper caste. Since there is no upper caste, the dominant OBC caste group is going to be upper caste. So the given social structure of our society, whatever the social setup you take of India's village, it represent you that the locational importance of caste groups will also tell you that the resource access of those caste groups. So the upper caste is going to be seen always in the center of the village. Then it will be covering up by OBC caste communities. On the other side, you have the minority sections, and the Dalits are always used to be drawn by a road or a lane. So there is also one more sort of norm is there that the Dalit wardas or Dalit caste group, caste places used to be always set in the south side of the village. So when I ask this question, why do they always find at the south side of the village, one of my respondents told me that upper caste and OBC caste always used to stay from the west side and east and west. So when the wind comes, the wind trespasses from upper caste and OBCs to the Dalits. So it's not either this way around. So but how do you justify that logic? Air can be any other ways, right? So that's not how that wind works. So these kinds of established notions that are there for rural the spatial setup of village rural India's village. So coming to the question that, as Srinivasan also asked in one of his field works, the Varna and Jati always is going to be assertive based on the number and dominance. So dominance usually not only with the number always, but the kinds of resources that you possess. The landlords in our any of the village setup, if you see, the number used to be always very minimal. 4 to 5 families of landlords in the entire village we used to see, right? So, but those 4-5 families are having entire domination on the other caste communities in the village. So, here the caste community of Gangaputra is having more in number. At the same time, they are also holding land around the lake. So, this makes them to assert their power over other caste communities because they are less in number. At the same time, the other groups does not have much resources in hand. So this is a simple fundamental logic that they followed. And the other caste Munur Kapus, one of the OBC caste community only. There are 4 families in the Sheikhpet village. They are holding up large chunk of land. They are considered as one of the dominant group, and by then they have taken in the consideration into every village activity. So the village predominantly do every year Bonalu festival. So in the Bonalu festival, Gangaputras and Munur Kapus are going to decide how the festival can be celebrated. So after some point of time, Dalits have also fought and become part of the committee. But while decision comes, so these 2 caste groups only dominate in decision making. So that's how it becomes like.
So I'll read out a question from online. Yeah. Can you explain a bit on hydraulic citizenship and its relevance to your talk?
Sure. So the central kind of argument we're trying to build here is to think about water and how communities relate to water in more enlivened ways. Like they're not simply dead water bodies with urban populations, that actually there are communities with specific identities and roles in relation to the water body as a resource, as a symbol, as a religious infrastructure in various ways. So the reason we are bringing this into the framework of hydraulic citizenship is because hydraulic citizenship has been proposed as a counterpoint to liberal citizenship, that for people like Basti dwellers, in the absence of access to abstract liberal citizenship, there are these materially negotiated, historically contingent ways in which they relate to water and land. And so what we want to do here is to add the lens of caste into that and add a consideration of how caste histories and caste relations and caste roles shape this hydraulic citizenship. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, to the one empirical evidence to this is the Rajaka Sangam that we showed in the slide, that Rajaka Sangam Bhavan inside the lake, right? So the way the water they used before changes at the lake place is entirely different from what they have been doing now. So earlier it was a freshwater lake, so based on the customary right, they used to wash clothes and use particular space in the lake to enter. So now, because based on the land use pattern, their entry is also restricted at one point of time, saying that no, you cannot wash anymore to your clothes because the lake is already polluted by the upstream pollutants. So that time, with the negotiation power, the political association of this group, they started putting borewell inside the lake. So here is a moral right as well as a customary claim. These two both are coming and saying that this is our lake, we have the right, every right, so we can, the surface water is totally polluted now, so we can use the lake water still, so that is groundwater. So that's where they approached political leaders and made the borewell inside the lake. And the political leaders also built the washing beds, and they also provided a community hall, the one that we showed, right? So it is serving as a community hall as well as a source of their claim to make on the land. So putting up the structure, putting up the borewell itself is my, I am not changing my association with the lake water. I am continue to going to change, but my claims are changing. So that's how the hydraulic, how do we put it? Like, if it is like a civic way of doing that, or, seeing like as a hydraulic as a material, these all kinds of questions can be answered through the kinds of things that they interact with the lake and water.
Thank you for that. So let's take two more questions before we close. I think there was somebody in the audience who wanted to ask a question. Is there somebody? No? Okay. So I'll just read out one more question from online so that you can kind of respond to that, and then we can close. The government role has been has influenced caste associations to organize based on resources as a method for appropriation. Do you see this trend happening at a larger level on nature and cultural resources from the SC and ST communities? I'm not sure if that you're able to understand.
It is like, sorry. It is, I also had a similar impression that, state is influencing too much on these village people or migrants, etc. But once I started interacting with them, I saw that in reverse. Seeing that political leaders are coming to the village place, and political leaders always seen as like a overpowering everything, right? So the village people all have started talking to local political leaders in terms of number. In terms of number, not in terms of caste in the first place. Of course, they have connected in the name of caste. Since the political leaders also approached the area based on the caste communities that are there in the Shakepet. We can see that the electioneering process that has happened, and the ward councillor that, if you can observe, elected ward councillor throughout the years. So in the Shakepet ward, the current Shakepet ward is considering surrounding the colonies also. So this particular Shakepet village does not have any Muslim population, but around that you have large chunk of Muslim population. So it usually, the ward councillor used to be Muslim or OBC caste community person. So this trend, if we can see that pattern, we can understand. So that itself, it tells us that the way the political leaders are appeasing the local people there is not in terms of dominance, but that location itself, like, this is falling to the Jubilee Hills constituency. Jubilee Hills is an elite place, and it does not have much vote. It has voters, but they are not going to coming to give votes always. So these are upper middle class and elite, right? So politicians in this land always needs a number. So in this area, we have large chunks of slums alongside the Pullanna, alongside the Nala that is connected through these lakes. From Durgam Cheruvu, upper stream of Durgam Cheruvu, then coming to Malka Cheruvu to Shakepet, then it goes down to Usan Sagar and further leads to the Musi River. So along these streams, the local politicians have planted slums because they need number and they don't want to go to this elite class and ask votes. So they know that they'll shut their doors on the face and they will never listen to the political party leaders. So that is how it has happened in this area. So that's how these village places like Shakepet have empowered themselves in realizing that there is a room for negotiating with the local political parties, and also can realize our interests, whatever we have. So that's how they started claiming that if my community leader is coming to my village and asking that, I am saying that our community voters are this much, so we need this from you.
So the question also asks a really interesting thing, which is that, if all these caste associations have claims on different resources, then it also becomes an easy way for those resources to be appropriated. So you have a one-point access to the lake water or the land around the lake. And I think this definitely is a risk in this kind of structuring of the cultural ecology of the lake. And probably in rural areas, this is more dire. But in bastis, for example, even though they are not making claims to resources, people are organizing as caste associations. And it definitely does become an easy way for the state to approach them and form vote banks out of them. In a sense, they are organizing themselves as caste blocks. So, even, for example, like one of the images we showed of a Batkama celebration, you might have noticed at the back that it was sponsored by CPIM. And so even, CPIM is not the face of resistance or anything, but like ostensibly it's a countercurrent, and even they have to reckon with this language and use this language to organize people to say, no, don't just become a vote block, or don't just become open to appropriation from the state, and that you can fight for your rights or fight for something else. So there's definitely an interesting way in which this organization of the political ecology in terms of caste relations does facilitate forms of appropriation and dispossession.
Thank you. So I think we are almost out of time, so we'll close the questions for now. Indivar, Pullanna, thank you so much for coming here and giving us this talk. It was really interesting. I personally found a lot of parallels with, as somebody mentioned in the audience over here, that a lot of parallels with what I've seen here with lake conservation and lake movements here in Bangalore. And, love to continue the discussion with you even outside this talk as well. And for those in the audience, apologies if we couldn't take all your questions, especially folks online, because I can see like more questions coming in as well. So we'll try our best to kind of forward these questions and make sure that Indivar and Pullanna get a chance to answer them as well. Yeah. So thank you all for coming, and folks online, thank you all for logging in as well, and hope to see you again in IIHS soon. Please do keep coming in.
Thanks to everyone, and especially Pragna and Tanvi, the persuasion that they had been for this talk, and thanks to IIHS, and at last all the audience and friends, thanks a lot for your questions. And I think we might miss some answers, but we keep on continue our conversation with you in the coming days as well. Please be in connect with us in all the social platforms that have been available, and I am also going to do the same. Thank you. Thanks a lot.